Hello, my name is Payman Asghari. I'm an ordinary Canadian. I went to high school here. Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of Inlay Terms. It's 2025. The entire setup has been changed. I wasn't expecting that intro video or all these pesky overlays. I'll get rid of them shortly. Today's guest is a friend of mine, Mr. Amrit Birring. How are you doing, Amrit?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks, Payman, for doing this.
How's 2025 been treating you so far?
Well, it's not holding back. We got news after news. We have Justin Trudeau's news, and once January 20th is there, we will have a lot more news coming from US, which also impacts us. And their offer to make us 51st state is open. So yeah, there's no shortage of news.
Yeah, it's most of it's bad, but some of it is somewhat good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll take a win after 2024. I'll take a win even if it's a small one. So,
sure. Yeah.
Amrit, you're a politician. You're a social activist. You are the founder of the BC Freedom Party, and you're an all-around incredibly intelligent man. Before we get to that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you were born, your upbringing, and what drove you to stand up for your country?
Sure, yeah. I am born and brought up in India, near New Delhi. I did my grade 12 there, and then I electrical engineering degree. I worked few years there, and then I moved to Singapore. I spent 3 years there. I became their permanent resident. Life was good, financially very good. It's very advanced and good country. But I had some hunger in me to see more of the world, and I applied and I got permanent residency of Canada. So I came here. So I can compare India, Singapore, and Canada. And once I came here, financially it wasn't so good. But there was something that I just stayed on, and I am glad I did because um, just in a nutshell, India is a lot of corruption there. When I went to Singapore, I noticed that people are okay, but the government is very honest. So that was very new thing for me, and that was very good because I'm not comfortable in corruption. It just I hate it. And when I came to Canada, I realized that people are honest and government is honest. So that was the thing that I did not go back. But it's changing in right in front of my eyes. The government is getting corrupt, and that's taking country down. So I am not. So this I'm not going backwards. I will just fight it, and that's my inspiration to come into politics and social activism. And there's no shortage of challenges and work in this field the way things are going. uh, and and my political career, first when I came to Canada, I had to go back to school. I went to UBC. I did a degree in computer science, and I also went to Langara College and BCIT. So I have experience of all post secondary education in Canada. For last 15 years, I'm working in the software development industry, mostly in Vancouver downtown companies. And then I noticed I was in Vancouver. I started noticing that the houses prices started going up from in 2001 average house in Vancouver was 250,000, the standard lot. In front of my eyes, it started going into to 300, 400, 500, 600,000, just like that. And it's just unexplainable. And during this time, all the realtors who used to be mixed, white, brown, Chinese, all realtors become Chinese, every single one of them, every sign from Chinese. So that's because people from China, they were buying properties in Vancouver. And why not in Shanghai and Beijing? You have an apartment at 1 million, 2 million. It's a shoe size. And here they were buying for one-sixth of the cost, big lot, fresh air, water. And they started putting money and it started going up. And as people started making noise, government said, we don't have any data. They just kept denying it. So that was my first introduction of corruption, that government knows everything, people are suffering, but they just outright deny. And the reason they were denying, now I know in the hindsight, is because they were collecting property tax, increased property taxes, and property transfer taxes. So they were getting surplus of income. So they were happy to throw people under bus. I know during Christy Clark's government, they had 600 million surplus at one point, and their secret meetings, someone exposed, they were thinking what to do, how to use that to buy votes. So bottom line is, government doesn't care, and then that housing issue spread from Vancouver to Burnaby, New West, Richmond, eventually to Coquitlam, Chilliwack, Surrey, and now coast to coast. No one can afford anything, and it's a direct result of government compromising Canadians for their own interest. So that's a blatant piece of corruption. And that's just one part. So, okay, since we were doing my introduction, so I noticed this. And on 2015-16, when I was living in Surrey, before I was in Vancouver, I was going to UBC. So Surrey was exempt from foreign investment. And suddenly, in 1 year, after exhausting entire lower mainland, the foreign investor turned their guns on Surrey. And 1 year, in single year, property prices went up by 40%. So I knew there's no hope now. It's every place is compromised. And then, of course, came the immigration wave via Justin Trudeau, and that just took it to another new level. And now, because of mismanagement, incompetency, cowardice, and corruption of government, the whole country is crying, and it's happening in front of our eyes. And this bugs me because I see it, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, and I I want to stand for Canadians, and I'm an honest person. I know when the corruption happens, everything goes down. Just select few benefit, 90% of people suffer. And that is the reason why in all the poor countries, whether it's in Asia, Africa, South America, the number one reason of miserable life of average person is corruption. You rid of corruption and people will be happy. So in Canada, where we did not have corruption and things were good, corruption is coming in big time and its result is in front of us. And that's my motivation to become social activist as well as come in politics to do what I can do based upon my capability.
So first things first, Prairie. Hello in the new year. Good afternoon. She's a fellow viewer. She watches every episode.
Awesome.
Um, so you use the word corruption. When you talk to ordinary people, when you say corruption, they think like cash in a brown paper envelope. But what you're describing is basically a tax, sort of a tax system, like the property tax, the transfer tax. That's it's created this environment where the government no longer serves the interests of the people. Is that correct?
Sure, yeah, corruption has many forms. Fundamentally, corruption means the government has no morals. They do every decisions based upon what benefits them and their backers. And of course, there's always a cover that they're doing for good reason, but uh, that's not. So, so one aspect of corruption, like let's talk about India, where I'm brought up. If you have to go to government, whether you want your passport, driver's license, you are a businessman, you need to get approvals. Everywhere there's a bribery. Everywhere rate is fixed. So you do need to get your papers in order. That's for sure. And then you have to pay them bribe money. So that's one little form of corruption. And when the government awards big contracts, multi-billion dollar contracts, building railway line, big industry, oil refinery, everywhere you have to uh, pay bribes. So what that does is it takes away a whole lot of money which should have reached people as part of benefits or reduced taxes. It actually goes to the coffers of select few. So that's that's fundamentally corruption. That there's no morals. Government does whatever it can get away with, and actually over time it become normalized. And people, I know in Asia, it's not considered bad. If you are in government job, then it's understood that you will accept bribes, and it's like admired that people want to go into government job just because of that. And and that's, I understand that has always happened in Canada too, but at very very high level. There's a reason every politician who starts with net worth of, let's say, half a million, by the time they retire it's 30, 40, 50 million, and that's not from their salary. For instance, I if you google the net worth of Pierre Polier, he started at 200,000. His end of 23 net worth is 25 million, which includes some investments, four properties. There's a whole breakdown. It's you can google, you will find, someone posted on Twitter, and it's done by Forbes, which does the net worth of big individuals. So it's verified. And if you look at Justin Trudeau, same thing for him. So we know that there's a corruption. It happens here too. But what's happening now, it's coming at low level. Before it was high level, people's life was good, so they didn't care. But now that they can't afford groceries, rent, gas, uh, hospitals are, there's a chaos there, schooling system. So now that people are directly impacted, they're thinking more about it, and I see it everywhere. The biggest corruption is political parties. We have two political parties, or in Canada, sometimes three, even though the winning ones are top two. The reason we have top only two parties because parties need money to work, a lot of money. All their commercials, their town hall meeting, their Facebook ads, everything costs a lot of money. And that money does not come from mom and pop donors. Sure, people donate some money, but there's no way that money is enough. It's always big people, big business houses, they back them up. And and they don't directly donate, because in Canada a corporation or a company is not allowed to donate, only individuals can donate. And there too is limited limit, like provincial is 1400, federal is $1,700 per year. But that big money that's coming in, it's coming from big businesses. And since party takes that money and they cannot survive without it, they they make the policies that are benefiting to them, those people, uh, giving them tax loopholes. For a little guy, you always have to pay full tax, 20, 30%, whatever, based upon your income. But big people, they always create some loophole and they don't pay much tax. So so end result is there is a corruption at high level. Political parties, okay, why do political parties not listen to people? They don't listen to people because they know that no matter what people say, they can still win as long as big money is behind them. And and sure, after 4 or 8 years, the current government always goes away because the reality comes out. So at this point, the other party wins, and and the current party knows that, okay, after 4 or 8 years they'll be back. So they have no incentive to really listen to people, because money is the what decides elections. And that's why beyond two party, third party, they will never let them come up, because it needs a lot of money, and they no one will put money on a new guy. And so it's a direct result of corruption. And because of that, the governments have brought Canada to its knees, and still they are in power. Okay. Now Justin Trudeau for nine in during 2021 elections, federal elections, Justin Trudeau was already in very bad shape. He had already done a lot of scandals by then. But the Conservative Party just couldn't lift themselves up. Uh, so the end result is by shenanigans, by NDP support, no matter how, Justin Trudeau is openly ruining Canada and he's still in power and we all feel helpless. So that's the result of corruption. Let me give you more examples. Why during COVID they could do all the tyranny that they did? That's because the blueprint of corruption is that you buy out top people. So uh, in Trudeau's case in COVID, they need to buy out the chief medical officers, have a secret meeting with them. They are getting incentive so that even though they know things are wrong, they will just keep pushing it. RCMP, at, I think at that time commissioner was Brenda Lucky. So you have a meeting with them. You have a meeting with all the provincial uh, premiers and the chief medical officers. As long as you get all of them on board, uh, this is just smooth sailing for them. So when you do a wrong thing and someone gets caught, who will punish them? Police and judiciary. But if you compromise them, then where do people go? So that's what happened during COVID. Even though the Charter of Rights were broken, medical principles were broken, but there's no implication because the top level people were corrupted and they make sure that if anyone makes noise, you punish them, make an example out of them, and rest of them will fall in line. So because of human corruption, they could do that. Same thing, climate change, SOGI 1 to 3, they make people vested interest who do their bidding. Funding is coming in. A common person cannot bang the head against their thick monetary wall, and that's why we are in the state we are in.
Okay, so
Little corruption, what it does.
first things first. One more godless woman. Hello, fellow tax slaves. Good day to you as well. Um, Before getting to COVID, I want to stay on this issue of corruption. What's the solution? If right now it's 17, I think $1,725 is the maximum federally. If you reduce that to $100, would that solve the problem because now you're on a level playing field?
Well, if the donations are reduced, I don't think those donations are much. The individual donation. I- I'm saying that that's not what parties rely upon. Parties rely upon the big donors, which is not allowed, but they have their ways to funnel it somehow. So donations are not going to solve anything. For instance, I think BC NDP did try to solve it. I think at one point, uh, corporations could donate money. Um, I think BC NDP at some point, I don't know in their current reign or previous reign, they in order to level playing field, they made the rule that no corporation can donate, only individuals. But there are ways. Just like I said, Pierre Polivar's net worth was few hundred thousand, not 25 million, and it's all legal. Same thing in US. Biden or Nancy Pelosi, who is sitting at billions of dollars. So they have their ways. So you can't stop it like this. I think there's no one solution. So we can just discuss what are the possibilities. One possibility is morality. The society which has morals, there will be less corruption there or no corruption. Once you lose morality, there's no law that can prevent you because as they say, laws are meant to be broken. And once the people who enforce the laws are corrupt, there's nothing you can do. In fact, the laws are applied on little person. The big people, you don't apply laws. Uh, for example, Biden openly accepted bribe from Ukraine. His son, he's on board of many companies there. His laptop was found. All proofs is there. He was found carrying, throwing a gun in the garbage bin. All proofs are there. But since FBI is protecting them, nothing happens to them. But a little guy, you steal $10 and you are guaranteed to end up in jail. So yeah, solution. Okay, one is you have to be moralistic society. Laws don't work if you're not moral. Second is there's some countries there's a draconian sentences like in Arabic countries. If you're caught stealing, your hands are chopped off.
Mhm.
So that's another approach, and that's very brutal approach. But I'm just talking about human psychology. I'm not giving my opinion what should be done. Now I give you example of Singapore. I've lived there. It's a very prosperous country. It's one of the rare countries in the world which is in Asia. It's very rich and it's very safe because a lot of cities uh, they are they are rich, but it's just capitalistic. There's a lot of crime. Like in US, even during in their heydays, there's always been plenty of crime. There's underworld, mafia, always. So how do you explain that? So Singapore is a unique country that it was founded in 1965. It came from the British colony, became free. In 1965, it was nothing but a rubber plantation. That's all it was. Forest with rubber. So when their first prime minister, his name is Lee Kuan Yew, he's passed away recently. When he became prime minister, he knew that if you have to build a country, you have to save it from corruption. And his past experience with China, he knew that what corruption does. So he made very draconian laws in Singapore at that point. And government was honest because of those draconian laws. And until today, it's what 60 years, Singapore's government is very honest and they have become miracle of Asia. They are one of the most developed country and not now. I lived there when I came here in 1996 and I compared their infrastructure and here. So this looked like a village to me, honestly, Canada. There was, and that I'm talking about 30 years ago. So so how do they do it? It's just an island. They don't even produce anything. There's no mining, no agriculture. They don't even have their own water. They get water imported from Malaysia. But because of honest environment, low taxes, and enforcing the law and giving people free rein to do what they do, entrepreneurial activities without any handicaps, that's how they prospered. And and that's recipe everywhere. So yeah, so that's what Canada needs to do. Um, but the prerequisite is always honesty, rule of law applying to everyone. If you can do those prerequisites, we can go very far.
All right. So just a shout out to Kirk Reese. Good morning, Kirk. He's a Canadian whistleblower. Um, Again, before transitioning to climate change, COVID, you mentioned low taxes. That was one of the reasons for Singapore's success. What do you think would be good tax policy for Canada?
Speaking about tax, I heard that Canada had zero tax until 1911 or so. There was no tax. But in the name of First World War, to fund it, they started taxing people, and probably they started at 1%. And I also know that US had no tax because they all came from Europe. They knew what government tyranny happens. So their policy was there will never be any tax and there will never be any federal bank because that's where the tyranny comes through banking. They control you. So there was no federal bank. It's only in 1913 those bankers who always control world they conspire and they were able to create federal bank. I know in 1800 sometime they were thinking of putting 0.5% tax, and there was almost mutiny against that, but they were still able to push it through. So 0.5%, 1%, same for Canada, and now it's 20, 30, 40, 50%. So it's a slippery slope. It taxes always go up. Even the temporary, sometimes they put temporary tax to fund certain things, and that always become permanent. It never goes back. So let's say what's good level of tax. I believe if someone is taxed at 40%, 20% is very good for them. Um, but really, it's there's no fixed number. If government is running things efficiently and government is light, not the heavyweight, not start creating department after department. If you keep your mandate minimum, then you just need to collect enough tax to fund yourself. And depending upon how efficient you are, it can be 5%, 10%, 20%. It depends upon needs. Um, but what we know that we are heavily taxed at this point. And if you think about, first you pay tax at your income. Now your remaining money, it's already tax paid. But then every time you buy something, you pay more tax, GST, PXT. And in a series of taxes, ultimately you die and you still pay a state tax. So it's a tax on tax on tax. Think about another thing. When someone buys a new vehicle, they pay full tax on it. That's a $60,000 vehicle. You already pay tax on it. Now after 4 years, you sell it at 40,000. Government collects again tax on it, and then someone sells it for 5,000 eventually, and they're still collecting tax on same thing again and again. So so these are frauds going on at all levels. Things have to be simplified so that people's entrepreneurship awakens, they are rewarded, and they have more incentive to do things. That generates more employment, more people are better jobs. So even your tax rate is low, you will end up actually having collecting more money if you have lower tax. So because you have more people have more incentive to do more things. So definitely I think our taxes should be reduced to half at the in a single stroke, and try to manage that. It will really open up the economy.
So, Wolf, he's a regular contributor. He always writes entire paragraphs, but a very
Okay.
smart guy.
Yeah.
We have enough in the way of natural resources, hydrocarbons in the ground, hard and expensive to presently extract, that can back our own currency, strike a blow against the criminocracy that rules here. I believe what he's saying, or at least my question, um, shouldn't like we have so much natural resources, we shouldn't have to pay taxes, right? Like you could just, if the government ran efficiently, you wouldn't have to pay taxes on that.
That's correct. So we are sitting on gold mine in Canada, just like Russia. And I mean, we are literally have gold as well, but we have copper, zinc, nickel. We have oil. We have gas. We have gold, silver. We have fertilizers. We have uranium. By the way, the biggest uranium mine and biggest fertilizer potash mine in the world both happen to be in Saskatchewan. So we are so rich. Um, so yeah, you're right. There are different plans. For example, if government gets corporate tax, and if it's enough to meet our needs, there's no need for personal income tax. In fact, uh, there's a guy called Gerald Salenti, very nice guy in US. He mentioned that in US there used to be no tax, which I know as well. But how they used to fund? They used to fund by tariffs. that if something comes inside the country, they put some tariff, and that was government source of income. Because someone will say, okay, if you don't have tax, how are they building infrastructure, roads, hospitals, schools? So there are alternative means. So yeah, sure, our resource, if we manage them properly, if there's no corruption, um, we shouldn't need to pay tax, and the oil should be very cheap for us. Like in Middle East, it should never go beyond $1 a liter. Actually, there are Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland. They are also oil countries. There's a there's a North Sea there. They all extract oil from there, and they are able to maintain very high lifestyle with very minimal taxes. In fact, they have a lot of state surpluses. They invest it. They have a massive fund, and they are doing it. And we are not. And we think about Middle East. Middle East are very rich countries. You go there, you look at their infrastructure, their inflation, their tax rate. They are very low, and just based upon oil. And we got 10 different things here: oil, gas, metals, minerals, fertilizers, uranium. So if our politicians and government are not acting as frogs in the well, they are actually competitive, they know what's happening in the world, our schooling system becomes competitive, so children are much more smarter, much more aware of the world, much more internationally competent, and they know what our strengths and how to maximize them. We could be a golden country for sure. And that's very sad that we are governed by, I can use the term retard. These people, when working for people, they become retard, and when doing the backdoor schemes to stay elected, then they become very smart. uh, so that's our irony here.
All right, well, let's move on to COVID. So, for people that are just joining us earlier, Mr. Beering said that the way that COVID happened is because of corruption. They corrupted the top level. They either went in to the chief medical officers or Commissioner Lucky and they gave them incentives, or alternatively, they made an example of them. So, Detective Helen Gruce right now is just being raked over the coals as an example of what happens if you go against COVID. What how does the incentive work? Because this was a lot of money that was taken from our coffers and given to Pfizer, for example. How does that come back to the chief medical officers and to Prime Minister Trudeau?
I can't tell you details because I don't have insider information, but I know that there are various mechanisms. I will give you just some mechanisms which are out in the open. Let's say Justin Trudeau made Pfizer rich. So after retirement, he might sit on their board, or his people might sit on their board, and they just might reward them somehow. One other way is some people write a book after retirement. No one buys their book, but some people who wants to reward them, probably they order million books from Amazon, not for reading, just to get the royalty. And then we know that uh, another way is they get stocks. Company can give them stocks. Sometimes they give them inside information. There's a Nancy Pelosi lady in US. She was Speaker of the House for longest term. She is 80 plus. She is sitting on like billions of dollars, and she has a trading account uh, which is managed by her agents, and they never lose anything. They always just make money, money, money. So what happens is every time they are enacting a new law, based upon that they know what will go up, and they just invest in it. Then another thing, there's people make a charity organization. That's another way. Uh, Bill and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton have a charity, Clinton Charity, And I know once on Bill Gates' birthday, the Prince of Saudi gave him the birthday gift $1 million he put in their charity.
That's very nice of him.
Yeah. uh, of course, it's a mutual. They will they militarily defend them, and so there's a lot of things happen we don't know. And then the news is that their daughter's uh, wedding was done from the charity money. A lot of money was spent. So yeah, charity is another big scam. Open charity, and they can't give you money, but they give you to charity. And these charities are notorious that they just 10-20% actually goes to the cause for which they are made. It's just a money laundering scheme. For instance, if the person goes to holidays, they show it as a field trip and they use money from charity. So that's another mechanism. And investment, I when I looked at Pierre Poliver's portfolio, he has solid investment, and apparently he has million or $2 million income uh, currently per year. And they do it, they got inside news, inside tips, and there's just mechanism to reward them by the industry. um, Whole lot of, yeah. I i since I haven't done it myself, nor do I intend to do, but I'm not privy to them. But you can, in even in plain sight, you can see so many things. And for instance, there was Gordon Campbell was premier of BC. After being in power for, I don't know, 10, 12 years, he was finally booted out. And what he does, they make him the in London embassy, he is the chief officer. So now he's retired, but he's living in London at government paid expense, house, everything. And that's because of his past connections. So they find ways to reward each other, because they know that if they reward them, that's an example for the other government that you keep helping us, because see, you do get reward even after retirement. There's no rush. And of course, the friends and relatives of politician, they might get placed in big companies just as a decoy, just to collect big salaries. That's another way, nepotism.
That would be Hunter Biden would be a perfect example.
Yeah, so in their case, everything was done based upon Biden's name, but he would never do anything directly, because if they get caught, they want to have his plausibility that, okay, I didn't know anything, but virtually it's done in his name. So yeah, they all do it. Biden, Hunter was just dumb enough that he's drunk, cocaine addict, and he gave someone his laptop for repair. Um, so but the others are smarter. They don't get caught. But it happens everywhere.
Well, let's move on to the next topic. You and I were talking about immigration, and I like the way that you phrased it. You said, you can tell the good and the bad things about immigrants, and you can tell the good and the bad things about, let's call it, natural born Canadians. And neither group likes it when you say bad things about them. But why don't we
Yeah.
start with the immigrants? Like, what are the good and what are the bad?
Yeah. So fundamentally, immigration is when you get people from outside the country. So now let me say that in general, immigration. I mean, in the olden time, there were no boundaries. Anyone could go anywhere. Eventually, countries became, there are borders. It's enforced. So I would say immigration is not normal thing, because the person who immigrates from one country to another, uh, in the new country, they immigrant because it's a better future. But if you think about why did they emigrate from the original country's perspective, it means things are very wrong there. That's why people leave. So let us just point this out, that it's a fundamentally, it's not a normal thing for people to move from one country to another. It just shows the original country is bad, again, because of corruption. and uh, people are just leaving it for their personal needs instead of fighting back and making their country better. Okay, now immigration is fundamentally it's a need based. Different countries have different models. Some, the Middle East countries, they get immigration because they need a lot of workers and engineers in their oil patch, and those are contract jobs. They get them for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. They keep cycling back. They make their money there. They're happy to go back home. It's already understood that they will go back, and it works fine. And then there's immigration in US and Canada, especially Canada. It's a sparse country, sparsely populated. So they can accommodate more people. So their model is just get the people and they become a permanent resident and they reside here. So now the issue is why they need people. So one thing is I know when they used to have lumber mills, which have all shut down now, but that was main economy in 70s, 80s. And a lot of people used to come from other countries than they used to work in mills. And they also, in the present world, they need immigration for uh, doctors, software engineers, the general electrical engineers, oil. For example, the Alberta oil refineries, they're all full of people from outside uh, because the Canada just doesn't produce those engineers, not enough anyways. So they come from outside. So this is our need. That's why we do it. Now immigration came more into picture because Justin Trudeau started abusing it. He just opened the gates for very different reasons, which they don't tell us. They say, oh, we have labor shortage, just make a one simple statement. But he had many agendas. Um, let's say one agenda is somehow in his mind, he wants to increase Canada's population. I heard they have goals to take it to 50 million and eventually to 100 million. I don't know who told him or whether their understanding is that to have an optimum economy in Canada, you need certain people. So that's one reason I believe. The other reason is since we don't have manufacturing here, we just sell raw product, which worked well in 1780s. But as the world moved on, there's industrialization, there's a high tech. Canada got left behind. So our government does not tell us something, but I can just guess that they don't have enough means to fund because we don't have big manufacturing base where they can collect corporate taxes. So what they do is they do patches. For instance, some tourism and the housing industry I was talking about that they were selling it to foreigners. The main reason for that is the money was coming in and government needs money because they don't have legit means, so they allow that to happen. Of course, it has side effects which are even more dangerous, but they don't care about long term. They just care about their government's term. Okay, then this we're talking about immigration. So the thing that Justin Trudeau did, I'm pretty sure in his sick mind, he did it to show the phony GDP numbers. So let's say, and how many categories they have? They have international student, they have workers permit, they have long-term visitor visa, which is 10 year, and they have refugees. So there are at least four categories. Refugees, they don't make money, they actually pay them money. But international student, when you bring them here, they're going to pay rent here, pay other bills, and their tuition fees three, four times than the local. So the educational institutes benefit from them because they get more tuition. And so this is their mechanism to pump more money in the system here. The other thing is those visas, mostly most of international students, they used to work 20 hours and then Justin Trudeau raised it to 40 hours. So they actually work full time and the actual studying is just a side thing, which they may or may not do, or they just do minimum requirement just to stay enrolled. So this was a way to provide cheap labor to Canada, for which the the companies benefit. You know, we don't have comparative industry here. So if you provide them cheap labor, they will they have better chance to survive and make some money, and that ultimately adds up to our GDP. So I think that's just into the scheme. Also, they give long-term visa. You can get 10 years visa, tourist visa. I mean, there's no 10-year tourism. It's a common sense, but the category is there. So when those people come, they they sure when they live there, they spend some money. And so basically, these are all schemes. So Justin Trudeau basically abused it so much that now it become a very dirty word. And and when people can't afford rent or mortgage, when they go to hospital, they have to wait for 12 hours. They have a hip surgery, but the date is 3 years later. So now they are suffering the actual consequences. So when that happens, people get angry. When they suffer, they will feel angry, which is natural. And the first thing they take out their anger is outside. When they go outside, they see a lot of immigrants, and they feel angry against them. Whereas it's the government who is bringing them. If government will bring people, they will come. And so, but the anger goes on people versus people, and that's another agenda. It's a worldwide agenda, at least Europe and America, that you put in so much immigrant from so many different places that you just destroy the social cohesion. And we haven't talked about globalist plans, that uh, the many dimensional plans they have. One of them is also destroy the country from within, destroy their nationalist tendencies, because when you put so many people, there's no nationalism left. They will just keep fighting among each other. So that's another purpose of immigration. Um, yeah, that's the big landscape of immigration. But of course, good immigration is you do on your need basis exactly what you need. Um, and even that is not normal, because it's a symptom that other countries are rotten, and they will not change. In order to make world a better place, we should all countries we should fight against corruption, governmental corruption in all countries, so that themselves become prosperous, and there's no need for people to leave one place and go to other place. That's my general ideas about immigration. And and let me say in a nicer way, there's a lot of rhetoric today: deport, and people feel very happy that deportations are coming. But again, they're playing into the hands of globalists. That's exactly what they need. People fight among themselves, and they don't see the uh, real problem where it's coming from. So their eyes are never at the real cause, but they just keep looking at symptoms and keep busy. Keep wasting emotions on them, and that's actually happening. We are at a point that it's very inflammatory situation. You can see at the social media, Twitter here and there. So right now, situation is so bad that if Pierre Polivar or Justin Trudeau, they go to a, let's say, Sikh temple, and they cover their head with a scarf, which is customary. Right now, you put one picture of them, and you can see the hatred coming in, even though it's a very normal thing. And to that end, PPC is very well infected with it too. I I bet if Max Bernier goes to a Sikh Gurdwara, Sikh temple, and puts a scarf, just a simple thing to participate in community event and meet them, that will create so much. People will just chew his head off if he tries that. So things have become that inflammatory, and it didn't happen suddenly. It has been engineered like that. There's the same reason that in US they keep their southern border open so that people just come in and its consequences will happen or they're happening, but that's the plan. There's also reason that why in um, Europe first you bomb Middle East, then you create refugees, and then you force every country to take refugees, and then there is a social cohesion breaks down there, then riots happen, people hate each other, and it's happening everywhere by design. So that's another aspect of immigration why it's being done.
You mentioned another thing. You said that you're happy to provide criticism of you call them white people, but natural born
Yeah.
Canadians, good and bad. What were you pointing out there?
Yeah. First thing, Canada is supposed to be a rich country, but we are not. We are poor. We have debt. We are begging to US tariff and that they are making mockery of us to become 51st state. We have a non-existent army because we live under shadow of US. So we at some point this our moronic government thought there's no need for army who will attack us. They did not think that if we under US protection then they also own us. We don't have self-respect. We lose out during bargaining position. So all these things have happened under who? Under our governments. They are all white. All prime ministers are white. All high officials are white. So Canada has is going down the drain because of white governments. Let's not overlook that. Let's not overlook who is bringing immigrants here. If let's say you blame immigrants, who is bringing them? It's white governments. Justin Trudeau, Stephen Harper, and Pierre Polivar is fully on board. So you need to ask them why do they do it? There's something they're not telling us. Um, and I don't know what that is because they will never tell us because they won't tell us because it's an insult to injury. The reason is Canada doesn't produce enough engineers, software engineers. They come from outside. Now, now we need to think why is that? Is that because our schooling system is dumbed down? Because it's a hard thing to say our children they are making them dumb because in schooling there's no studies, there's no exams, there's no competition. You just show up to K-12 schooling system and you graduate and you know nothing. So this is Achilles heel and it's all who are the educators? All white people, ministers, all white people. So they became complacent, smug, lazy, and everything is a side effect of that. So yeah, they are causing it, but they don't look at the root cause. They look at the symptoms. Symptom is immigration is a symptom. You cannot produce your own professionals, so you get from outside. Why other countries can produce those? Because other countries are poor, so they have cutthroat competition. People have to really work hard to survive. So they have hardworking habits, and that's why they do higher education. They work hard, and some of them come here. If we can do same thing here, we won't need immigration. But over time, we got lazy and we got out of touch from the what's happening in other countries, and we just live in our own little bubble, almost like a frog in a well. And that is fundamental problem of Canada. So that's my criticism, and I think it's very valid. And I am educated in India. My basic education, first degree, and second degree at UBC, computer science. My two children are born here and they're educated here. So when I say Canadians are dumbed down, my own children are included in that too. So it's not like I just came from outside, I'm criticizing here. I am I am feeling the blunt end of it too. And I can compare because I spent 26 years in India. I know their education. I know Singaporean education. I know Canadian K-12 schooling system. I have comparison, so I can clearly see any international students who come to, let's say, grade 7, 8, 9 here instantly knows that it's a baby shit is happening here in schools. There's nothing. And in few years they become like that too, but it's a shocker for them what such a low level. So, and this is actually root cause of Canada's every problem is our K-12 schooling system. And no one talks about that, not one person. The reason for that is all these politicians are also raised in same education. They have no comparison with the higher standard. So for them, it's the norm. So they never think about it. It's a non-issue for them, and that's the problem. So it's very important to point this out. That's why I'm spending a lot of time on SOGI 1 to 3 in schools. But I'm also, once I get opportunity, I always make it a point that our education is very diluted and it's not even enough for them. Like BC NDP, their latest plan is first thing they don't give any exams and stuff to to move to next grade. Just it's teachers' discretion and everyone is guaranteed to pass. And they have grade A, B, C, D, which doesn't tell you much. It's up to teacher what they give. And the NDP's latest idea is that we should get rid of those as well because it hurts students. If someone gets B and you get C, so you are not happy, so just don't give grades. I mean, think about their distorted thinking. It's just not, nothing is enough for them. As it is, it's a disaster, and they are so smug that they still want to take it to lower level. So schooling, uh, and let me add more to it. Uh, we have a diamond. Diamond becomes diamond because a rough stone has to be rubbed to make a diamond. Same thing goes for human beings. If we have to make intelligent people, they need to they need to use their brain. They need to use brain exercise. They need to do writing, reading, solve problems, get dirty. Uh, and that doesn't happen in our schooling system. Most of time they came up with the research that just do objective type question, they just pick one right answer. That's good enough. No, that's not good enough. You need to be willing to solve math problems, sit down hours and hours, get angry, upset, seek help. You need to really, really work hard. Only then you will develop. And that development is not happening in Canadian K-12 schooling system. If you look at our university, it's full of international students. And I'm not talking about Justin Trudeau's immigration. I'm talking about pre-2015. If you go to any big university, their master's program, PhD programs, they are all foreigners there. Our children, they just simply do not make it there. They don't have motivation. Something is done to them in the schools that they just lose their motivation to do any big thing in life. It just survives somehow.
Do you? We're going a little over. How are you doing for time? Do you have time for another question?
Oh, you're asking me? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I have plenty of time.
Okay. SOGI, can you explain for the audience what is that? What is it? What does it stand for? What does it mean in practice? And what's your opposition to it?
SOGI stands for sexual orientation and gender identity, and SOGI 1 to 3 is education given in BC, entire Canada, entire US, Western Europe. Um, so in BC, it was brought in 2016. There's a human rights bill. It used to be called sexual orientation, that based upon sexual orientation, there will be no discrimination at workplace here and there. So you can be gay or lesbian and you will not be discriminated against. In 2016, they brought a bill in BC legislature. They added gender identity and expression to it, that based upon those things, there will be no discrimination. Now, the issue there is gender identity means you can identify anything. So this is not a scientific thing that you can identify anything. Excuse me. Implication of when the bill was passed, all those people who voted yes, no one had any idea that it will be applied in schools. The understanding was at workplace in professional setting. But it was a deep plan. Whoever brought the bill, their idea was to use in schools, and they tricked everyone. So now the issue is boy can identify as a girl, girl can identify as a boy, and it will be honored. They can change their pronoun, they can change their gender, and in order to um, bring in that education, they did not make it part of curriculum because curriculum is printed and parents wouldn't like if they do it. So they call it teaching resource. So they teach it below the radar, and they hired regular teachers don't teach it. They hired special LGBTQ teachers for it. They get special funding. They are vested interest. Uh, it's in their interest to make more people LGBTQ by confusing them, and they don't even have to be by birth. You just inject ideas in children's mind. There are books to indoctrinate them, and they tell children don't tell at home what you're learning about SOGI. Many children they have changed their pronouns. Their parents don't know, and federal government passed bill C4 where if your child want to transition, you cannot counsel them, otherwise you go to jail. There's a gender transition surgery clinics. A 12-year-old person can decide to have top surgery without parents' permission. There are books in the school, elementary as well, where there's pornographic pictures. There's this famous book in secondary school where there's a picture of a boy sucking the dick of another boy. In elementary school, there are pictures that two naked girls are on bed, two naked boys on bed. So we think these are all inappropriate things. SOGI, they are taking the cover of human rights, but their intention is something very different. They talk about human rights just to shut down the speech, uh, but their intentions are to make children to confuse them, inject ideas in their tender minds, which will never go away. And the children who end up doing gender change surgery or go on puberty blockers, their life is never the same. Uh, all research shows that once they grow up, their body says something else, and the new surgery says something else. There's a conflict in the body. They go on drugs, and they end up committing suicide. That's what I say about SOGI 1 to 3.
What's in it for them? Like, if you're one of the people that's pushing Soji 1, 2, 3, what do they
Great
have
question.
shares in a gender transitioning clinic?
Uh, it's a lot bigger than that. Though, so um, first, my theory is that the globalists for last 5 years they have special agenda. They want to destroy the world, just implode it. Uh, so COVID was part of that. Climate change to make punitive taxes on us was part of that. SOGI 1 to 3 is also part of that. Uh, so some agendas make us poor. Some agendas make us suffer health-wise, like COVID. And this agenda, it 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 attacks at the very individuality of the person. To tell a child that gender is fluid, it's just destroying them from within, so that they even question themselves. When a child is born, first thing is a boy and girl because that's inherent, right? If you think about human civilization has come this far because a male and female reproduce. That's science. That's the reason there's a male and female. If you tell child male can transition to female and vice versa, or it's a fluid, some days you can be male, some days you can be female because you feel that way. So this is just to destroy the humanity. And this is not first time. In 1920s and 30s, in Germany, certain people were doing same thing. By the way, the first transgender clinic, sex change surgery clinic was opened in Germany in 1920s. And then they did started doing it more and more. They started making um, pornographic books, transgender books, and they started putting in the libraries. And ultimately, If you know, in 1930s, during Nazi Germany, they burnt all those books. Those were transgender books. So time and again, certain people, they push these things to destroy and control society. So so that's the bigger picture. That is the reason the SOGI 123 government has no intention to back down, because there are very big forces pushing it, and those are beyond government. They own government. For instance, how SOGI was brought into BC. At that time, the government was BC Liberal, but the bill was presented by BC NDP MLA Chandra Spencer Herbert. He's a gay man. He's still MLA from Vancouver. It's not normal that opposition presents bill and government accepts it. They don't even accept. It never happens. But this bill was accepted. And then they passed it fast track in 2016 summer. And when the bill was passed, um, the Christy Clark, who was premier, she wasn't even in the session. They didn't care. But someone pressurized them to pass this bill, so that that same September school year they started implementing it in schools. Bill doesn't mention anything about schools. It's about workplace. And all the MLAs who signed it, including David Eby and John Rustert, is a signatory to it. Okay. And now
Oh
they're
wow.
saying the SOGI bill of 2016 in BC legislature, the people who voted yes for the bill, John Rustert also voted yes. He was MLA of BC Liberal. And now this guy is saying his platform is to remove SOGI 123 from schools. So So bottom line is, now if you ask them, they say we didn't know they will do it in schools. So it's all deception, and that's why it's very dangerous. There's nothing normal about it. And the last thing, uh, the the philosophy of education is, first thing, it will be published, and parents will be involved in education. In theory, in BC, they say there are three parties: teacher, student, and parents. It's a joint collaboration. It's not that government can do anything to schools. But in case of SOGI, they're not first thing, they did not ask parents, they did not take their consent, and now there are massive protests. They do not care. It's the parents, it's their children. You will not shove down anything down their throat. If parents disagree, it will not be taught. It's not math, science, English, dramatics, French that they're teaching. It's something very, very different, fundamental to human beings. And yet they don't care about what parents think. And both parties. And so why is it so? Because there are bigger forces pushing this onto them. So you ask, what's the reason? This is the reason. It's the globalist agenda. They want to destroy family values and society. That's why they're doing it.
So follow up question. When you say globalist, do you mean like when I say progressive, it's an ideology, or are you talking about like the super rich cabal, a couple of people that pull the strings?
Actually, I can give you some pointers. Um, there's something called, um, when I gave the example of Germany, the people who were pushing were Jews. Now, this is controversial, but it's a historic fact. There were Jews doing this. They have a Talmud which has eight genders. They have eight genders in Talmud. I made a post on Facebook. Two of them are the boy who can identify girl, girl who can identify as a boy, or transition. And we know they open first transition, medical transition school as well. So I think it's coming from there, because they specialize in dividing society, confusing them. That's how they rule them. It's coming from them. They have all the money, uh, and they own USA. They own US Congress. They own all the banking, Hollywood, pornographic site, pharma companies. Every big pharma company CEO is a Jewish origin. All banks chiefs are Jewish origins. All Hollywood owners of studios are Jewish guys, or pornographic Jewish guys, or social media companies, their chiefs are Jewish guys, including Mark Zuckerberg. Everything. And this Conservative Party of Canada is fully backed by them. How do you know? They always talk about anti-Semitic. They don't talk about anything else. For other races, only anti-Semitic. When they do that, you know why they're saying that. For instance, um, conservatives are through and through backed by them. So is Trump. No wonder now this U.S. Big politician, they are retweeting all Pierre Polivar's tweets. I mean, what's their business? And they're putting down um, um, Justin Trudeau. Now we hate Justin Trudeau too, but foreigners don't have right to interfere. That's foreign interference, but they're openly doing it because this whole thing is aligned with U.S. Israel now. They want to take over Canada, and even the NDP, which is not with them, but they have so much sway over them. They forced David Eby to make Holocaust a compulsory subject reading to graduate grade 10. So 2025 September, there'll be mandatory Holocaust training for grade 12 students. So why? I mean, there are so many genocides happening in the world. Actually, I wrote email to David Eby, which I published on my Facebook. I asked him, there are dozens of genocides. One is happening right now in Gaza. You don't talk about that. You don't talk about Bolshevik and all other genocides. Why you are fixated on Holocaust? And it should not be there unless you teach all Holocausts. So it's happening because these people, they're control freak. And and that's my biggest worry is with PL Poliver. He's being trained and schooled and groomed by them for this purpose to do their bidding. And uh, if you if you notice, if you post anything against Pierre Poliver on social media, people start chewing your head right away. They're just controlling everything. That's typical their blueprint, just control everywhere. um, Same thing, conservative BC. I hear there's a heavy interference in them as well. There's a reason that from zero seats, they got 44 seats. A lot of money is involved. A lot of money. Money buys everything. You can't grow just like that without massive money behind you. So, yeah, these powerful people are pushing it, and there's a historical precedence.
No, I was just laughing at Pierre. He called himself a goy from the prairies. But yeah,
Excuse me.
I guess that was my last question. We were going to talk about the Israel Palestine thing. I guess you covered that. I guess my final question is, where are you going from here? You're still the leader of the BC Freedom Party. What's in store for you in the next couple of years?
We will continue activism. That's our main thing anyway. The party is on the side so that we can use our ideas and put candidates. It's mostly activism. And I personally will start doing some podcasts so that all the events happening, we can cover it with our perspective because general media doesn't cover it. So we need to tell people truth. And that's where I will spend my time as well. Now, mind it, Rebel News was doing something like that. Um, and it did a very good job during COVID. But it turns out that they're fully aligned with conservatives. And it almost seems like all the work they did was to, their main motivation was to bring down um, Trudeau and prop up conservative. So looks like they were not pure organization. They had vested interest. Like Ezra Levant, he was classmate of Daniela Smith, and he has deep relations with Pierre Poliver from the past. And I also noticed that during BC provincial election, a lot of grassroots groups became came up in Facebook. They were doing Zoom calls, and ultimately it turned out they were all the feeder units for conservatives. They were not like natural grassroots. They were all funded by them, and they were all directing ultimately, oh, vote for conservative. And same thing right now. Many groups on Facebook, they are doing Pierre Poliver's bidding. There's one Awake Canada. It has 158,000 members. I posted few posts on them criticizing Pierre Polivar and Gaza issue, and they blocked me. And they claim to be Canadian patriots, but they aren't. Its purpose is putting all people together and ultimately direct them to conservatives. So it's a frauds all around going on, deception all around. You don't know who is your friend, who is your enemy at this point. So that's why I want to do my own journalism, and all the events happening, I'll cover my own perspective. I'm already doing on Facebook, just making raw videos, but in order to engage people, you need a little more professional grade. It looks good, and I'm thinking that in that direction.
Well, Amrit, you're a man of integrity. So if you do go to into journalism, I have no doubt that you will be a fantastic journalist. And I don't I hope, but I'm pretty sure you won't end up like these people that are completely bought out. I've noticed it too. So if I was going to share my thoughts, Ezra Levant and Rebel News, I was down at the Coots protest, and even back then, like 2 3 years ago,
Yeah,
people were saying like something's up with Rebel News and Rebel News, True North, all of these people, they're basically turning into mainstream media, but CBC is for the left and these guys are for the right.
exactly. They are the equivalent from the right side. But again, we still don't get true journalism. We get vested interest just giving one-sided perspective.
Yeah, Amrit, I was just going to say, can you tell the audience where they can go follow you, maybe support you?
Yeah, so um, if you Google my name, Amrit Birring, luckily you will get my Facebook, Instagram, Telegram, Twitter, LinkedIn. All accounts will show up, including YouTube and TikTok channel. Or you can go to those individuals and just search for my name. Whole history should be there. Um, if you want to support, if you live in Lower Mainland Surrey area, you can join us when we do some protest and rallies. We are doing one on January 16 in front of Surrey courts because last year there was SOGI convoy going to downtown, and there was a tractor guy with us. Police did a maneuver and overturned his tractor, and now they are actually prosecuting him that he was doing dangerous driving, and that was part of SOGI convoy. So we'll be there in January 16. But in our social media, when we do something, we make a poster and we post it in advance. As long as you are in connected to us in one media, you are there. And um, if you want to become MLA or want to be in politics, then Freedom Party of BC, it's a fourth largest party in BC now in terms of forming candidates. You can take some role there. You can join us, support us in any way that's appropriate for you.
All right, Mr. Beering, I want to thank you very much for coming on, and I hope to have you back at some point in the future.
Thank you, Payman. Thank you for wonderful job you're doing. You are becoming quite an expert at this too.
Thanks. If you want any tips, I can help you out.
Okay, sure. I'll reach out to you.
All right, take care. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, goodbye.